Gentlemen, I need to tell you something that may shock you. Prostate disease doesn't begin quietly in the doctor's office, and it doesn't start the day you're diagnosed. It begins right now in the choices you make every single day. In fact, the habits you believe are harmless, sitting too long, eating your favorite foods, or pouring that evening drink may be silently forcing your prostate to grow. And once it starts, the suffering can be relentless. Nights ruined by bathroom trips, pain in your lower body, even the loss of your strength as a man. My name is Dr. Mohit Kara. I'm a board-certified urologist and men's health specialist with more than 30 years of experience caring for men just like you. I've dedicated my life to protecting the prostate because I know how much it defines a man's comfort, his dignity, and his vitality. I'm not speaking to you as a stranger. I'm speaking as someone who has guided thousands of men through this very struggle. Here's the paradox. Most men think prostate growth is inevitable, simply the price of aging. But the truth is different. The size of your prostate and the symptoms you suffer are shaped by your daily habits. And some of those habits are far more dangerous than you realize. That's why I'm here today. I want to show you the worst of these hidden habits, the ones quietly driving your prostate to enlarge. If you can stop them, you can reclaim better sleep, stronger flow, and a healthier future. And stay with me, because at the end, I will reveal the single most destructive habit. The one I beg every man over 60 to quit immediately before it steals the very life you've worked so hard to build. Before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another important prostate health message designed for men over 60. And I'd love to hear from you. If you find this video helpful, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 and tell me how I can make this content more valuable for you. Now, let's begin with the very first and most destructive habit. The one I see harming more men than any other. It's not a pill. It's not a food. It's something you do every single day without thinking. Gentlemen, I'm talking about sitting too long. 1. Sitting too long. Every day, long every day. When I look back on the men I've treated over the last 3 decades, there is one pattern that stands out again and again. Many of them spend most of their day in a chair, whether it's hours in front of the television, long stretches behind a desk, or even sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. And they all say the same thing. Doctor, I didn't think sitting could be dangerous. But here's the truth I've seen with my own eyes. Prolonged sitting is one of the most destructive habits for the prostate. When you sit for hours without moving, the weight of your body presses down on the pelvic floor. That constant pressure reduces blood flow to the prostate. And over time, the lack of circulation triggers low-grade inflammation in the gland. Inflammation may sound harmless, but in the prostate, it acts like gasoline poured on a fire. The tissue responds by swelling, growing, and thickening until suddenly a man finds himself waking up 4 or 5 times a night just to pass urine. Some men even tell me that the simple act of sitting becomes uncomfortable, a dull ache that never really goes away. I remember one patient, a retired truck driver, who sat behind the wheel for decades. By the time he came to me, his prostate was so enlarged that he could hardly empty his bladder at all. He told me, "Doc, I wish someone had warned me earlier that sitting was part of the problem." That moment has stayed with me because it reminded me how easily small, unnoticed habits shape the entire course of a man's health. The good news is this doesn't require a miracle drug to fix. Standing up every hour, walking for 5 minutes, or even stretching your legs can make a tremendous difference. It keeps the blood flowing, the muscles relaxed, and the prostate healthier for longer. And while sitting too long may be the most destructive habit, it is not the only hidden danger. In fact, there's another everyday choice millions of men make at the dinner table that quietly feeds prostate growth, and it's far worse than you think. Eating processed meats and dairy too. Eating processed meats and dairy. Over the years, I've had countless conversations with men who tell me with pride that they've earned the right to enjoy their favorite foods every day. A few strips of bacon at breakfast, a cheeseburger at lunch, maybe a plate of sausage and mashed potatoes for dinner. "Doc, it's comfort food," they say, smiling. And I understand that food is more than fuel. It's memories, traditions, and pleasure. But as a prostate doctor, I've also seen the heavy price these foods demand. Processed meats and heavy dairy products may taste good in the moment, but they quietly feed inflammation and hormonal imbalances that make the prostate swell and grow. These foods are often loaded with preservatives, saturated fats, and hormones that act like fertilizer for an already sensitive gland. Think of it this way. Every time you put processed meat or excessive cheese on your plate, you're giving your prostate a signal to keep expanding. Over time, that expansion turns into nightly trips to the bathroom, urgency you can't ignore, and a slow loss of freedom that steals away the simple joys of life. One man I'll never forget was a retired firefighter. He told me he'd eaten bacon and eggs almost every morning for 40 years. When he came to see me, his prostate was enlarged to the point where we had to consider surgery. He looked me in the eye and said, "If I had known what those breakfasts were doing to me, I would have changed years ago." That kind of regret is something no man should carry, especially when healthier choices like fish, beans, fresh vegetables, and nuts can be just as satisfying without harming the body. I tell my patients, it's not about never enjoying a meal. It's about making sure your food works for you, not against you. And just when you think food is the biggest culprit, there's another hidden danger many men never suspect. Something they drink every single day, believing it's harmless, when in reality, it's making their prostate even more irritated and inflamed. Drinking too much coffee and alcohol. 3. Drinking too much coffee and alcohol. One of the hardest conversations I have with my patients is about the drinks they love most. Coffee in the morning, a glass of wine with dinner, maybe a few beers with friends on the weekend. It all feels like part of life. Many men tell me, "Doc, I've been drinking coffee for 50 years. There's no way it could be hurting me now." But I've seen firsthand how those daily choices can quietly irritate and inflame the prostate until the symptoms become impossible to ignore. Caffeine is a powerful stimulant, and while it helps you feel awake, it also overstimulates the bladder and puts pressure on the prostate. Men often describe feeling like they need to urinate constantly, even when their bladder isn't full. Alcohol, on the other hand, dehydrates the body and makes urine more concentrated, which further irritates the urinary tract. It's a 1-2 punch that leaves men waking up multiple times at night, exhausted and frustrated. I remember a gentleman in his late 60s who came to me complaining that he couldn't get through the night without making 4 or 5 trips to the bathroom. He loved his strong black coffee in the morning and a few glasses of whiskey in the evening. When I explained how both were fueling his symptoms, he looked at me in disbelief. But after cutting back to a single cup of coffee in the morning and eliminating alcohol before bed, he called me weeks later and said, "Doc, I finally slept through the night. I feel like I got my life back." That's the power of awareness. Simple adjustments that change everything. And while what you drink is a major factor, there's another habit that men rarely think about. Something tied to pride and convenience. Yet, it quietly puts enormous strain on both the bladder and the prostate, leading to consequences far worse than most realize. Chronic stress and anger. 4. Chronic stress and anger. If there's one thing I've learned after decades of listening to men in my office, it's that the weight they carry on the inside often shows up in their bodies. Stress and anger may not seem connected to the prostate, but I assure you they are. When a man spends his days wound tight with anxiety or simmering with frustration, his body produces an overload of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this constant flood disrupts the delicate balance of testosterone and estrogen, a balance that is critical for keeping the prostate healthy and stable. I've had men sit across from me with tears in their eyes, confessing that they feel trapped by financial worries, by health issues, by the loneliness that sometimes comes with aging. One man in his 70s told me, "Doc, I get so angry at myself because I can't do the things I used to do." That anger wasn't just in his mind. His prostate had grown to nearly twice the normal size, and his symptoms were unbearable. It was a painful reminder that the body listens to every emotion we hold on to. Chronic stress tightens the pelvic muscles, restricting blood flow and increasing pressure around the prostate. The result is more inflammation, more swelling, and more nights lost to discomfort. It's not just about biology, it's about how unresolved feelings slowly carve away at a man's health. I tell my patients that learning to release stress is just as important as taking a pill or changing a diet. Whether it's prayer, meditation, breathing exercises, or simply walking outside, finding peace of mind gives the prostate a chance to heal. And while emotional stress may be invisible, there is another habit that is far more obvious, one you notice every single day. It happens when nature calls and you choose to ignore it. A decision that seems harmless in the moment, but can do real damage to your bladder and prostate over time. Ignoring the call of nature 5. Ignoring the call of nature. This may surprise you, but one of the most damaging things a man can do to his prostate is something that feels almost trivial, ignoring the urge to urinate. I hear it often in my office. Men tell me, "Doc, I didn't want to get up during the movie," or "I was in the car and thought I could wait another hour." At first, it seems harmless. After all, what's the harm in holding it a little longer? But when this becomes a regular habit, the consequences for the bladder and prostate can be serious. When you consistently resist the urge to urinate, the bladder stretches and struggles under pressure. Over time, this weakens the bladder muscles, making it harder to empty fully. And when the bladder doesn't empty, it leaves urine behind, which creates a breeding ground for infection and forces the prostate to work harder against the backflow of pressure. I've seen men who developed chronic urinary tract infections, stones, and even permanent bladder damage, all from years of putting off bathroom breaks. I'll never forget one gentleman in his late 60s who worked as a long-distance bus driver. He admitted to me that he trained himself to hold his urine for hours at a time because he didn't want to inconvenience passengers. By the time he came to see me, his bladder was so enlarged and weakened that even simple urination was a painful struggle. He looked at me and said, "Doc, I thought I was being tough, but I was only hurting myself." His story is one I share often because it shows how something so small can slowly take away a man's dignity and comfort. The good news is that the solution is simple. Listen to your body. When nature calls, answer it. Don't see it as weakness. See it as respect for your health. And while ignoring the urge is a hidden danger, there's another silent threat that sneaks in when men try to avoid bathroom trips altogether. It comes not from holding back, but from holding off on something even more essential, something as simple as water. Not drinking enough water. 6. Not drinking enough water. You might think that cutting back on water will save you from those frustrating late-night trips to the bathroom, but the truth is the opposite. I see this mistake all the time in my clinic. Men come in exhausted from waking up every 2 hours, and they proudly tell me they've started drinking less water to fix the problem. But when I examine them, their urine is dark, concentrated, and irritating the very organ they're trying to protect. Dehydration doesn't help the prostate, it makes the situation worse. When the body doesn't get enough water, the urine becomes thicker and more acidic, which inflames the bladder lining and aggravates the prostate. This irritation leads to urgency, burning, and even infection. I once treated a man in his 70s who admitted he had gone an entire day drinking only 1 glass of water because he was terrified of getting up at night. He developed kidney stones that not only caused excruciating pain, but also put enormous strain on his prostate and bladder. He told me later, "Doc, I thought I was being smart by avoiding water, but I was slowly poisoning myself." His words are a painful reminder of how a simple habit can spiral into something far more serious. The body depends on water to flush out toxins, to keep the urinary tract clean, and to maintain healthy circulation around the prostate. Without it, the system clogs, stiffens, and suffers. That's why I always encourage my patients to drink enough water throughout the day, tapering off in the evening. You can protect your sleep and still nourish your body. And while water is a simple fix, there's one final habit that is often overlooked, something many men shy away from discussing openly. Yet, avoiding it can create congestion and pressure inside the prostate that no amount of water can wash away. It's deeply personal, but it may be the missing piece to protecting your prostate health. 7. Avoiding intimacy and ejaculation. This is a subject many men hesitate to bring up, but it is one of the most important parts of prostate health. Over the years, I have had patients lower their voices, glance around the room, and ask me quietly, "Doc, does it really matter if I'm not intimate anymore?" The answer is yes. It matters more than most men realize. Avoiding intimacy and going long periods without ejaculation can create congestion inside the prostate. The fluids that are normally released build up, circulation slows, and the gland becomes more prone to inflammation and swelling. I remember one patient in his mid-70s who told me he had not been sexually active for nearly a decade. He assumed that was normal for his age, that his body simply didn't need it anymore. When I examined him, his prostate was enlarged and tender, and he suffered constant discomfort. Once we discussed safe, healthy ways to restore intimacy, even if that meant solo release, he noticed real improvement. He told me later, "Doc, I never thought something so personal could have such an impact on my health." His relief reminded me how deeply connected intimacy is, not just to the heart, but to the prostate itself. Regular release helps to flush the prostate ducts, improve blood flow, and prevent the stagnation that leads to pain and enlargement. It's not about performance, it's about health and well-being. Men often think giving up intimacy is part of getting older, but I assure you, it is part of staying well. Now that we've uncovered the 7 hidden habits that quietly make the prostate grow, I want to bring it all together. Because among these, there is one habit so destructive, so common, that I beg every man over 60 to quit it immediately before it robs them of their comfort, their sleep, and even their dignity. Conclusion. My final words as your prostate doctor. Conclusion. My final words as your prostate doctor. Gentlemen, we have walked together through 7 habits that quietly, steadily fuel the growth of your prostate. We began with the danger of sitting too long, a habit that strangles circulation and inflames the gland. We looked at the foods on your plate, processed meats and heavy dairy that act like fuel for enlargement. We talked about the drinks you love, coffee and alcohol, that irritate the bladder and keep you awake at night. we uncovered the toll of chronic stress and anger, invisible forces that disrupt hormones and tighten the very muscles around your prostate. We faced the harm of ignoring nature's call, of training your bladder to hold what should be released. We addressed the silent mistake of not drinking enough water, a habit that leads to concentrated urine, infection, and stones. And finally, we spoke about intimacy, how avoiding release allows congestion to build until your prostate swells with the weight of neglect. Each of these habits may seem small on its own, but together they shape the story of your health. Over the years, I have seen strong, capable men lose their freedom to something as simple as getting up 5 times a night or the embarrassment of leaking at the wrong moment. I've also seen the transformation when they make changes, when they stand up more, eat cleaner, cut back on alcohol, release stress, and honor the needs of their body. The difference is often nothing short of life-changing. I want you to know that my plea to you comes not from fear, but from hope. You still have the power to protect your prostate, to sleep peacefully, to live with strength and dignity. Among these habits, sitting too long remains the most destructive, and it is the one I beg you to quit immediately. Do this, and you give yourself the best chance to reclaim your nights, your comfort, and the manhood that is rightfully yours.